Right, so here I am in After Effects. I've imported all my footage and images that I'm going to need for this tutorial. Here's some footage I recorded earlier today, just outside my house. Pretty simple, nothing too complex, and not too much movement going on either, so it should be a pretty handy track. First off, drag your footage into the comp window, and before you track, I just suggest that we set up a new null object, because we're going to track the data, and then the data that's obtained from that track is going to be applied to this null object, so that can then be used as a reference point from here on out in the design of this animation. Right, so pretty simple to track in After Effects. It's okay for pretty simple, not too complex tracks such as this, so it shouldn't be a problem. First off, just select your footage and go over to the tracker window here. If the tracker window isn't here, then you can just head up to window and go down to tracker, and it'll be there and it'll pop up for you. We're going to track the motion, so you need to click track motion. The motion source, yep, it's district footage, grand, and everything else seems fine. Leave it at transform. We don't need rotation or scale, at least not for this clip, because I'm not zooming in, or the camera, there's no scale going on. Rotation, the camera isn't actually rotating, and if it is, it's very minimal. So just in order to keep it simple, I'm going to not bother checking the rotation. We're just going to have the position. So now that it's given us this one track point here, I'll zoom in a little bit. We're going to have to find an area that's consistently in the screen at all times. So in this case, I think there are the trees that are there, but the trees are sort of they're not a solid shape. They're kind of they're a little bit ambiguous, so it might be tricky track. So what I'm going to use to track is the corner of this cloud. It may not always be a good idea to use clouds, because if clouds are moving, that means, okay, they're moving around the frame because the camera is moving, but also they're moving within the frame. So it's a bit tricky, but in this case it'll work fine. So I'm going to hit play. Alright, I think that should be a good point there. I'll try to get somewhere with a bit of contrast, so there's a good contrast between the blue and the white there, so this will work. You might have to play around with it a few times until you find a good track. But anyway, I'm going to hit analyze forward, so he's going to play forward for me. And as this is doing this, I'm going to cut through to the next part. Right, so here we are, we've got the track, it's completely finished, as you can see. And now we have to apply it to that null I just created. So you edit target, you make sure that it's hit on null 1, which is correct. I'm actually going to rename this. I'm going to call it track null, just so we know what it is. And yep, edit target's going to be on track null. Then you just go hit apply. There's not much more to it than that. X and Y, correct, because you want it up and down, left and right. Right, so there we go. We've got the track on the corner of that cloud. I'm just going to play this through real quick, just to give you an idea of how accurate the track is. Looks pretty good if you ask me. That's kind of the best you can ask for when it comes to After Effects. So yeah, let's go and get our image into this scene. So we've got the spaceship here. I'm just going to drag and drop it in. It's a bit massive. We're going to want to shrink that down. But first of all, here's the track, and here's the spaceship. And we want the spaceship's position to be the same as that red square the whole time. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Alt. We're going to click Position. Then we're going to pick whip down to the position of the track null. Right? So now, as the footage plays, it sticks to the tracker, which is exactly what we want. It's a bit big, so I might scale that down 30%, maybe 40. How about 35? Yeah, that looks good. Now, I don't really want it there. I kind of want the spaceship to be over here a little bit. So I'm going to use the anchor point of the spaceship and just kind of move it around until it gets to a place where I'm sort of comfortable with it. Maybe somewhere kind of half in the clouds. That looks pretty good. We can maybe off center actually. I don't want it quite in the middle. Yeah, that looks kind of good. Right, so play that through again. Yeah, looks good. Yeah, I like how that looks. Grand. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of color correction just to get them both looking like they're from the same scene. To do that, I'm going to start with the district footage, and I'm going to go to Effects, Color Correction, and I'm going to apply a photo filter. I want to make this kind of have a warm feeling to it. So by default there's warming filter 85. I kind of like 81, and maybe I'll bump that up a little bit to about 36. So we're going to apply the same filter, Command C or Control C on the PC, and we're going to paste that onto the spaceship. So Control V or Command V. Right. So already you can kind of see that they're matching up. They've got the same kind of hue to them, the same kind of grade. I want to punch out the blacks a little bit. I'm going to add a slight S curve to each. So Effects, Color Correction, Curves. Right, so at the moment we've got the spaceship selected, so I'm just going to give this a slight S curve. Nothing too mad, right? And the reason you might ask why I'm doing these separately, why I'm doing curves separately on each, is because I don't want to do just an adjustment layer, which just then affects everything underneath it. I want to have a little more control of the two layers just to get them to match up correctly. So maybe this doesn't need the blacks punched out as much. Maybe it just needs a little bit of white. Okay, it's kind of looking a bit better. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a mask to the bottom of the spaceship just to make it fade out a little bit, to become sort of transparent, almost like as if the clouds are coming around in front of it. So I'll zoom in a little bit for that. Pretty simply, select the spaceship and just start drawing a mask around the bottom. Doesn't need to be anything spectacular, just a simple mask along the bottom. It all depends also on the look and feel of your shot. It may not be a case where there needs to be a fade at the bottom, but I just think it might work in this. So M to bring up the mask, double M to bring up all the information about it. I'm gonna hit invert and then feather this a little bit. Maybe bring these points down a little bit. They don't need to be so high up. You can sort of play with this until it looks about right. Everyone's footage is going to be different, so just keep playing with it until you sort of get a look that you think is what you're looking for. Right, so I think it's kind of getting there to match up a little bit. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply an adjustment layer. I'm going to call this adjustment layer Glow or Atmos Glow. I'm going to go Effects, Blur and Sharpen, Simple Fast Blur, maybe like 20 repeat edge pixels so you don't get that kind of very boxy vignette. And then I'm going to go down to opacity. I'm going to set this to maybe like 40. Then object in the blending mode I'm going to hit add. Okay, maybe even less than 40, maybe 30. Just blends it a little bit better. Just gives it that kind of hazy feel. You want to be careful with that though. I think maybe like even 25 will be enough. You don't want it looking kind of tacky like it's out of the 80s or something like that. So the next thing then I'm going to do is I'm going to add some lighting, some lens flare. Now I want to really be careful with the lens flare here because it's easy to get carried away. So again, the same idea, adjustment layer. Rename this lens flare. I don't want to get carried away with the lens flare here because it can look a bit like cheesy or something. So for this, I'm going to use the Null Light Factory lens flare kit, which is available for download on the Red Giant Software website, but you can get a trial, pretty handy. So for this, I'm going to use Light Factory default. I'm going to just put that around here. Effects. I'm going to use for this. I'm going to use the Light Factory Spectacular, I think. Right. Okay, so layer, new, solid, black. Call this lens flare. Okay, so I'm going to use the Null Light Factory, which is from Red Giant Software. You can get the trial pretty handy. It's a really cool kit, and they've got loads of different varieties. But I'm just going to use the Light Factory EZ for this. There's plenty of different styles, but I'm just going to use this one. I kind of like it. Brightness, that's way too high, so maybe about 40. But before I go into editing all the parameters, I'm just going to set my blending mode to screen so that it blends in correctly. I'm not going to even have it at 40. I think like 25 should be plenty. And then I'm going to place that light source right. So right now, if I let this play true, you'll see that the lens flare doesn't move at all, so it just doesn't look right. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the position of the spaceship, but we're going to do it with the light source location of the lens flare. So we'll head into Effects, Light Factory EZ, and then you can see here the light source location. We're going to Alt click that, and then it brings up this option here to add an expression, or we can pick whip using this. Pick whip the location according to the track null's position. So pick whip, go down, drop it on position, and that didn't do anything. Right, so here's the easy lens flare, but I want to set my blending mode. Before I go and do anything else, I want to set my blending mode to add. Okay, it's pretty bright, so I'm going to bring that down a little bit, maybe down to about 20, or even less, even 10, and I'm going to actually up that to 12. Then I want that now to be, kind of on the spacecraft, like the spacecraft's emitting kind of shine from the sun. But as you can see, it doesn't really follow the spacecraft. It kind of just stays there. So what we need to do is we need to apply the track data to the light source as well. So to do that, I'll click light source location, and then we'll get the pick whip and we'll drag it down to the position of the track null. So right now it's on that corner there. So now when I play it true, you'll see that this right now when I play it true, you'll see that the lens flare stays attached to the spaceship. See, rather than, and now when the camera goes up, it'll stay down. It behaves well. Right, so if I play that real smooth for you now, So yeah, kind of what I want it to look like, but still doesn't look right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to brightness. I'm going to alt click brightness. I'm going to give it a good old wiggle expression, just to give it a little flicker, give it a bit kind of give it a bit of a sense of movement. I'll show you now, maybe once. So it's going to change that number by 5, up and down by 5, one time every second. So now when I play this through, okay, hold on, 10. Right, so I'm gonna add an expression. I've added the expression 10. So I'm gonna give it a good old wiggle. Wiggle. Let's say a value of 10, 4. Let me play this now. See how this looks. Yeah, that sort of looks kind of what I want it to look like. Maybe I'll cut this down from 4 to 2. Just make it a little less frantic. Yeah, that's pretty good. Even 1 actually could be fine. Or 1.2. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah, so just keep playing with the feels and the variations until you kind of get something you want, what you want, how you want it to look like. So right, okay, I might apply a little blur to that as well. Blur to the lens flare, just so it gets rid of, you know, gets rid of the obvious lens flare filter look. So yeah, blur, fast blur, give it a 5. I think that looks good. Maybe an 8. There we go. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to add some light in another lens flare, but it's going to be more as a atmospheric light rather than a direct light beaming off, rather than a light source beaming at the camera. Same way I'm going to do that is same idea as the last lens flare. Layer, new solid black. I'm going to call this Atmos Light. Effect, not Light Factory. How about maybe just the default one this time? I'm gonna lash that over here somewhere. It's not too important. Again, same idea. Convert this to. This time I'm gonna convert it to screen. Okay. I'm gonna place this about here, but it's not too important. Again, we're gonna work this out. Head into the effects here, Light Factory, light source location. I'll click that, so you pick whipped it. Head on down to track null and pick whip the position. Right, so that's gonna place that light source exactly in the location of the other one, which isn't what we want. So in the expression box here, I'm going to type plus 200 to move it over a little bit, maybe even over a little bit further. 400, yeah, even further actually, over about 600. Right, so here in the expression box, I'm going to add a simple equation just to bring that lighting over further as possible, far out of the frame, so we're just getting a slight glow off it. I'm going to bring that over about, so plus maybe about 1000. Let me see how that looks. It's probably a bit too far, maybe like 900. Yeah, okay. And I'm going to up the brightness of that as well. Okay. Now, I want to add this same wiggle expression that I added to that light so that there's sort of like a synergy between the two lights, so it's like they're reacting similarly. The expression from before was 10 to 1.2. Just head over here, hit enter, paste it in, and now that should be wiggling a little bit. Right, so I'm going to paste that into the brightness. Paste. Let's see how this looks. Maybe I want to make that more than 10. Should probably be around 25. Okay, so I'm just going to play with these values until it sort of, play with the wiggle values until it sort of looks right. I'm going to keep it at 1.2 just so it's similar to it's the same as the reflection off the spaceship. But I think maybe 30 should be fine. And I might bring this out a bit further just because I think it's maybe a little too imposing there. Right, I'm going to apply a pretty heavy blur to this one as well. Just because I don't want it to actually look like a lens flare, I just want it to look like a light source. So, effects, blur, fast blur, just bump that up to about 25, maybe even more, maybe like 50 repeat edge pixels. That should look pretty good. If I play this through. Right, so it's kind of what the lighting I want it to kind of look like. Maybe the lens flare is a little high, a little bright. Maybe I'll bring that down to about 8. Maybe I'll blur it a little more, at 12. Okay. Okay. That's kind of looking what I want it to look like. But what's going on now is we're sort of getting the color corrections kind of off again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go layer, new, adjustment layer. I'm going to call this color correction. And this is where I'm going to do the main bulk of my color correction right now. Effects, color correction, curves. A little bit of an S curve without it not being too harsh on this one. So you don't want to blow out any of the details. Head into the blue channel. Lower the blue a little bit. Want to kind of warm this image up, and lower the green. Yeah, that's kind of looking what I want it to look like. Effect, color correction, photo filter. We're going to really warm this one up, so nice orange. Okay, effect, color correction, curves. Here's the second curves. Now nice strong S curve. Okay, let me see. Alright, that's a bit orange. It's a bit too much, so I'll bring that down to 20. Maybe even put this underneath the atmospheric light. There we go. Yeah, that looks a lot better. That's a lot more like what I want it to look like. Just going to do a quick RAM preview of this. I think overall though I want to desaturate this a little bit because things are beginning to get very colorful. I just want a bit more of a desolate kind of feel to it. Okay, so layer, new, new. I actually don't need any. Okay, so we gotta close up these boxes here. I'm just gonna close up these effects, color correction, hue saturation, master saturation, let's say -20. Let me see what looks good. Let's just say -25. Okay. Okay. Right, I like how this is looking, but I still think that this atmospheric light needs to come down a bit. So it's a little bit pink. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the hue and saturation on this adjustment layer. I'm just going to copy and paste that over to the lens. I'm just going to copy and place that over to the atmospheric light I've got going on here. Maybe I'll bring it down a bit further on that one. Let me see how far I can go. Here we go. How about if I totally mute it? Okay, I might bring it down to about -50. And let me play this through for a bit. But yeah, so that does kind of look like those old films that I wanted. Okay, I think one more adjustment mask, adjustment layer, effects, color correction, curves. There we go. Curve's gonna up this a little bit, this down a little bit. Okay, there's something's not right about it though. There's something that's still annoying me, and you know what I think it is? I think it's this mask that I applied to the spaceship. I don't think it's needed, so I'm just gonna hit M, delete that. I think that looks better. I'm going to also apply a little bit of animation to the spaceship. I'm going to make it move a little bit. So P for position, or rather A for anchor. So I want to animate the anchor. I don't want to animate the position. Set this here, and then maybe in the last frame, I'll have it having moved. I don't know, like a tiny bit, or something like that. So it's really just a small bit of movement, nothing major. Have that small bit of movement. Right, so I'm going to copy that anchor position and I'm going to place that on the lens flare as well. Ooh. The difference is 5/8. Right, so that's kind of basically run through of the effects. Right guys, once you're happy with how your comp looks, go ahead and export it, then re-import it into whatever editing suite you like to use. I'm going to use After Effects in this case. So drag it into the comp window and see we've got the animation here. I just want to add a little bit more life to it, so I think maybe about here I'm going to have it cut out and just go black along with the sound effects. So the sound effect I'm going to use is, I got from the trailer appropriately. So if you want to view the waveform to see kind of when the hit is, just double hit L, so double L, and it'll give you a nice waveform, so you can kind of see when the crescendo is and when you need to cut the clip. So I think about here will be a good time to cut it. So maybe a build up of about 10 frames of animation. In this case, I'm just going to have it flickering on from the clip, from the video to black to video black, video black, just kind of like a flicker, an interference of sorts. So that's simply done with a new layer, a new solid, black solid. Got to hit T for opacity, keyframe that, has at 100 now, but at 0 for the first one. Command right to go ahead 1 frame, and then keyframe that again with 100. Then I'm going to select these two. I'm going to hit Command C or Control C to copy it. Go forward 1 frame. Command right, paste, 2 frames, paste, 2 frames, paste. Maybe we'll put 1 more in. There we go. So now we've got a flicker, which is kind of what I want. Maybe it might be nice to throw in an adjustment layer, new adjustment layer, and on this adjustment layer we're going to apply an invert. So you go Effect, Channel, Invert. We only want this for about 2 frames, somewhere in the middle, just to mix it up a little bit, kind of make it appear like there's something else there. There we go. I think that should look pretty good. Let's RAM preview this real quick. So I think that already it already adds a lot of more mood to it. Maybe I can even add some music to the back, or just some kind of atmospheric music. So I'm going to put in some of these sounds here. Let me see how this looks. Okay, see, that's coming in at the wrong time. Sort of the singing is coming in when I don't really want it to. How about this? Right, so I've got some music in there now, and I've got some sound effects as well as a bit of flickering going on. So pretty simple, but can make a big difference. Okay, so I hope this tutorial was useful and you learned something, and hopefully you'll hear from me soon again. And yeah, let me know what you think. Talk to you later.